So, Broncos country, Sean Payton changed up how he did practice on Thursday, and he did it for one player and one specific play. Will it help? We're going to get into that and also talk about how the big news of Thursday may have affected what the Broncos might be doing with one of their star players, at least contractually, and maybe their cap situation long term. This is Denver Football After Dark. Thursday night into Friday morning here in the Mile High City. Sorry I wasn't with you guys last night. Just schedule got away from me a little bit. And George Payton talked Thursday morning at 8:30. So that meant I had to get to bed a little bit earlier. So had to hop on that conference call and hear from him. He had a couple of interesting things he said. We're actually going to get into that here on this edition of Denver Football After Dark. But it was really interesting that he was asked in the morning by Arnie Stapleton of the Associated Press about whether the Micah Parsons contract situation would affect what happens with Nik Bonitto. And then, of course, we get to later on in the day, and Nik Bonitto signs a contract that takes the average annual per year contract high for an edge rusher up by $6 million. And we know that Nik Bonitto, he's not going to get what Micah Parsons got, and he's not going to get what TJ Watt got. But is that going to have a domino effect on what we see in terms of edge rusher contracts? We're going to get into that here on Denver Football After Dark. Because there's the old cliche that the rising tide lifts all boats. And if the top player, the top contract for an edge rusher is now $47 million average per year, and $136 million guaranteed and $120 million fully guaranteed, as is the case for Micah Parsons, does this all of a sudden change what Nik Bonitto and his side will want in terms of a contract negotiation? I mean, this is something that comes into play. Certainly, there's no indication that things are going poorly on the negotiation between Bonitto's camp and the Broncos. And certainly when Nik Bonitto was asked about it, he was pretty confident things were going to go well. And George Payton offered an answer on the state of things with Nik Bonitto in regards to whether the Micah Parsons situation had any impact. That it was not really much of an answer, but certainly didn't indicate, I think, any cause for alarm.
And, as far as any other stuff, we're just going to, we've done a good job of keeping these things quiet and respectful. We're just going to keep it that way.
Yeah. So, he wasn't going to say very much there, was George Payton. Likes to keep these things in-house, keep them quiet. And it's, I think, to the Broncos' credit, they've kept things fairly quiet in terms of contract negotiations so far. And they've been very successful considering the deals they've gotten done in the last 13 and a half months, from Quinn Miners to Pat Surtain to Jonathan Cooper to Garrett Bowles to Cortland Sutton and, of course, most recently, Zach Allen. The Nik Bonitto situation, though, it's certainly interesting because he does really only have the one season of premium production. That's very good. And if you start kind of parsing things out on a per pass rush snap basis, it's easy to project what he could do in the future. I know if you start saying on a per year basis, then you say, okay, he's not worth a high number, but the per year basis includes a rookie season in which he was playing infrequently. And so he's not going to have infrequent snaps going forward. That rookie year, it's a different situation than what he has now. So that's part of the thing that comes into play as well, is sort of what you expect him to be. So what does Nik Bonitto expect to make? I mean, I think that's something that is fair to ask. And what is a fair expectation contractually now? I mean, now that we're talking about the peak contract being $136 million guaranteed and an average annual per year value of 47 million being the top. I mean, how much does that change things? I mean, think about the fact that when we woke up on Thursday morning, the top edge rusher contract on an average per year basis was $41 million, and now that figure went up $6 million. So I mean, it went up what, 13% in one day. I mean, that's a massive increase in per year value. And so now you look at it, and this was the graphic that we used over on the piece that I ran elsewhere on this channel, and also ran at Denver Sport on the Denver Sports Facebook channel and on my social media channels as well. I mean, that's the top 4 contracts in terms of guaranteed money for edge rushers: Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, T.J. Watt. And then you get to the next 4: Max Crosby, Josh Hines Allen, Brian Burns, Montez Sweat. And I think realistically, in terms of what you're talking about Nik Bonitto meriting based on one excellent season, I think what you're talking about for a contract is probably somewhere in the range of, in terms of a guaranteed contract, I think you're probably talking about somewhere in the range of Max Crosby to Brian Burns, which, by the way, means you are giving him a guarantee that is greater than Pat Surtain. It would be the biggest guarantee in the history of the Denver Broncos. And I think that is actually something where you say, whoa. Now, that being said, the market is reset every year. So, I mean, you do kind of say, whoa, when you're going to have somebody who's making more on the defensive side of the ball than the defensive player of the year. And I think that can maybe take your breath away a little bit. But at the same time, there is a positional value thing. With all due respect to corners, edges are going to be the top paid players on defense. You have to view edges as kind of like quarterback on the defensive side. That's going to be the apex in terms of value contractually, in terms of how you're building a defense. So these are things that you just have to consider. Jonathan, go to bed, my guy. I mean, it is after dark. I mean, that's sort of the thing, right? Happy Friday night, Mace. Happy Friday night to you, Jack. So, oh, man. So these are all things I think that that are really coming into play as we discuss these contracts here. So that's really what's on my mind as we start this show. That's where I wanted to open with. But I think I also want to talk about the punter situation, because I opened with that as the title here. And if we're talking about what was notable on the field Thursday as the Broncos had their last practice before they scattered for Labor Day weekend, everyone's relaxing. It is a bye weekend, effectively, since they changed the schedule back in 2021 and added the 17th game, but turned this weekend into a bye weekend. There used to be preseason games this weekend. Now there are not. It became a bye, and everyone scatters. Coaches scatter. players scatter. They had practice, and then they had the luncheon for corporate sponsors and people who ponying up money and whatnot, and then everyone went their separate ways for the weekend. So it's a chance to kind of mentally refresh and physically refresh after the rigors of training camp. But their last practice today, which, by the way, is the last practice we in the media will view in its entirety until next May at rookie minicamp. For me, it's the last practice I will see all the way through until Shrine Bowl week. The last football practice I'll see from beginning to end. So I had a little tinge of sadness as I walked away from Broncos HQ, knowing I would not see a full practice again until down in North Texas on a Saturday in late January. And it was an interesting practice because Sean Payton did something that he hadn't been doing. Something that is about one player and about getting him right. And it was about Jeremy Crawshaw, the rookie punter, and simulating punts as they're going to be in games. Now, ordinarily, when you work on punting in practice, you do a punt period, which is 6 to 10 consecutive punts. And they're still going to do that to get the punt team and the punt return team work. But now in practice, they're going to simulate punts as they are in games, which is you go through offense versus defense and then stop. We're going to have a punt right in the middle of this. And so they'll be having their normal 11 on 11 reps and then hold it up, send the punt team out there, send the punt return unit out there, and we're going to do a punt right in the middle of this. And they did that a few times on Thursday. So I think it was an obvious question for me to ask Sean Payton. How did it go? And how did Jeremy look doing that? Here's Sean's answer.
It was a great idea by Riz. We get into these periods and then we go punt and we're going to have a punt period, right? But in the game, it's punt, you're out there one punt, and so you're on hole 17, it's a par 5, you're on the tee. And just creating those situations, I think benefits the young punter because that's kind of the game, If you said, hey, we're going to go out there, we're punting, and everyone chill out for a second while he hits 3, and then he's going to punt on, that's not very realistic. So I thought he handled it well. I thought it went well, and we'll continue to do that.
He handled it well, and the punts that he did out there, I can kind of confirm that if these were punts in games, they would have done the job effectively. So that's a good sign that when he was put in these situations, he did the job as you needed it to be done. Now, it has to be done in the game when the lights go on. Coach thought he did it well. So, now we see if it translates. He's had 6 punts in preseason games. Really, one of them was really good, and it was actually the one that bounced into the end zone for a touchback. It was a 61-yard punt. That's one where if you've got the guys getting down there fast enough, that's potentially down to inside the 10-yard line. But that was a good punt. And there's another one, the first one that he had against the San Francisco 49ers, that should have not been returned. That's a coverage bust, quite frankly. That's probably part of the reason why Sam Franklin didn't make the team in the end. There were other guys who did better on coverage than he did, that were better on special teams than he was, and Franklin ends up not making the team, and other guys do. Franklin was brought in for special teams, and others end up being better than the veteran was. So you had basically a couple of punts that were all right, and then the best punt result-wise for him was actually one you were lucky wasn't returned because it was 3-2-8 on hang time. So one punt that was great, one punt that should have been sufficient but had a coverage bust, and 4 that are like, okay, if these are in regular season games, there's a good chance that these aren't going to get the job done. You're going to have to do better. So you hope that this works out, this tweak to the practice protocol. You hope that it works. Give credit to the Broncos and Darren Rizzi and Sean Payton for trying this. Because here's the thing. If you've been around football people, you know they are creatures of routine in the worst way. Like, they like everything just so, and they don't like change. They don't like to change how things are done. Change can be glacial. So you are changing up the entire flow of practice, and you're doing it for one guy to get him right. Now, this is one guy whose work may end up being exceptionally important because I'll throw a scenario out there. You're playing the Chargers in week 3. You're in the 4-minute offense. You're up 2 points. And let's say the 4-minute offense gets stopped on 3rd and 4 with, say, 2.5 minutes to go. And the Chargers take their second timeout. They've got 1 timeout left. 2.5 minutes to go. The line of scrimmage is at the 36-yard line, at the Broncos 36, okay? So here's a point where this is the situation for which you drafted Jeremy Crawshaw. Boy, you are asking for him to flip the field, man. Give us one of those boomers. Heck, I mean, even if you kick it to the opposite end zone and it's a touchback, that's still a pretty good punt because that's 44 yards net. That's good. You're getting them back at the 20-yard line, right? I mean, that's doing a nice job. So this is where you tell them, if you knock the ever-living crap out of the football, if you launch one of those rockets like you've done all the time in practice, 44 yards net, even if it goes into the end zone, great. And heck, if you launch one of those rockets and it bounces, inside the 10-yard line and it goes out of bounds at the 5 or something like that, then man, you earned your gold star for a week. You're probably walking away with a game ball if the Broncos win this game. For that alone. So, hey, if we see one of those beauties like we've seen in practice, tip of the cap, man. That's what we drafted you for. That's what the coaches will say. But if we see one of those shanks, the laterals, the dreaded punts off the side of the foot like we have seen, if that thing is a fat wobbler that goes about 28 yards and the Chargers are starting at their 36-yard line and Justin Herbert is one completion away from midfield, one moderate completion away from midfield, 2 moderate completions away from being in pretty solid field goal range. Yeah, at that point, you're saying this might have helped cost you a game. Now, there are other things, and the guys in the locker room will say, hey, it's a team game. Defense should have gotten a stop. Offense should have gotten a first down, blah, 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 blah. But the punter will be part and parcel of that as well, because you will have asked him to come up with a big blast. And that was what you drafted him for, and he didn't do his part. So, anyway, there will come a point and in the season where the Broncos are going to need this guy to come up big and show the kind of leg that we've seen in practice, that we saw in the Senior Bowl practices, that we know is there, but we have not seen when the lights are on yet. Shoot, we've seen it in warm-ups. before the San Francisco game, they're warming up. So what they do is like the punter and the kicker and the long snapper. So Crawshaw, Will Lutz, and Mitchell Fraboni, they're the first three out. And they're doing their warm-ups. And then the next players out for warm-ups are always the kickoff and punt returners. So they come out on the field. And it's usually like, it's not just the primary returners, but anyone who might return it. So usually it's a cluster of players, including you got corners, running backs, wide receivers who may not necessarily return, but it's a bunch of, it's several guys for each discipline. And Crawshaw is punting it to these guys, and they're standing it around midfield, and Crawshaw is back in the end zone. And the guys who are fielding punt returns are getting frustrated because he's launching it over their heads. He's back in the end zone. They're all at the 50, and he's just bombing it to like the opposite 40, opposite 30-yard line because he's sending these rockets way downfield. And so you're watching this, and you're seeing the same thing that you've seen in practice, and it's like, boy, he's out here, he's in the stadium, he's kicking it a ton. And then you get out to the game, and it just thuds. Instead of boom off the foot, it's a thud. So, anyway. Comments. The lights might be too bright for a friend from down under. The land of wonder. The land down under. Sorry. I remember when I was a kid on ESPN on Saturday mornings, so this is dating me, on Saturday mornings on ESPN, watching Australian football. This back when before ESPN would just fill their mornings with sports centers over and over. And they'd take breaks, and it was before Paul Hogan was a celebrity from Crocodile Dundee. He would do commercials for like Australian tourism. And he'd promote the land of wonder, the land down under. It was like, Australian tourism commercials. That's what he'd say. So anyway. Will I do halftime videos this season? No. I don't even do halftime. I've never done halftime videos. Well, for one thing, they don't really want you doing videos in the press box anyway. It's sort of a rights thing, so I don't really do that. And I don't like to do like thoughts like that during the game. I don't even like doing thoughts right after the game. Like there were a few years where I would do a video when I worked for the Broncos immediately after the game, and it wasn't my favorite thing because I hadn't gathered my thoughts. And then during the COVID year, there were 4 games when I did the DNVR show right after the game, and I hated doing that because, again, I haven't gathered my thoughts right after the game. I like to at least hear what is said in the locker room, hear what the coach says, and then go on that. So sorry, Jack. No, I will not be doing a halftime video. So, anyway, Denver football after dark. Do I think the new Aussie tight end will get a chance to punt? I think Murtaugh maybe gets a chance in practice, just messing around. But no. I don't think you'll see him get a chance to punt in a game. Maybe just messing around. Like I said, messing around in practice. But that'll be it. Still believe Bonitto has upside. Pay that man. Should they sign Bonitto to 3 or 4 years? I think ultimately it'll be a 4-year deal on him. Would I make the deal for Bonitto? There's a price point I would not go past. I would not do $40 million a year on him. And in fact, I would be hesitant on $35 million a year. To be honest, I think there's a point at which I'd say, okay, we've got some guys here in the wings, and I'm not sure I'd go past $35 million a year at this point for someone who's had one really good season, who still is developing against the run. That's the thing. I mean, he's an exceptional pass rusher, but against the run, he is still developing. He improved against the run last year to where you could start him and play him every down. But remember, at the start of last year, this was still a player who was still a rotational edge. He got in there and proved he was not a liability to the point where you couldn't use him on first and second downs, and that's what allowed you to trade away Baron Browning. But he is still not the run defender that Jonathan Cooper is. Jonathan Cooper's really strong at setting the edge. And Bonitto's not at that level. And Bonitto may never be at that level. Watching Coop against the edge, I was saying this during training camp at one point to my friend Ryan Edwards. And I said, boy, you see it on film, but then when you watch Coop up close at field level in training camp, your appreciation for how well he sets the edge, just, it's renewed all over again. He is so good against the run. So good. And I'm not, is Coop. I'm not sure, Bonitto may never hit that level, and that's okay. It's just something that Coop does very well. Can Bonitto improve there? We'll see. Like, as Gary Kubiak would say, we're fixing to find out. The contracts are getting out of control. By the time we pay Bo, the market will command $100 million a year. Well, the contracts are getting out of control, but the revenue is going up as well. That's the other thing to consider. I mean, the contracts are only reflecting the revenue increase and the cap going up because the cap is tied to revenue. That's sort of the genius of the whole thing, is that as revenues go up, the players get more money because it's tied. It's a percentage. It's tied into that. So the more money the league generates, the more money the players get. So, I mean, what I do wish is that as the revenue comes in, the thing that I wish the players would fight for in terms of all this revenue coming in, sometimes I don't think they fight for the right things sometimes. I wish they would do this at the next CBA. Instead of necessarily fighting for just huge numbers on contracts, fight to make sure you get health care for life. Access to health care, health insurance for life. That's something that I really think would help everybody. Sometimes I think if there's a failing of the NFLPA, it is that like the NFLPA reps, they are guys who've generally been in the league for a long time, and thus these are guys that have gotten to their second and third contracts, which means that they're on the higher end of the wage scale. But remember, the average career length is not even 3 years in terms of playing in the league. So that doesn't necessarily represent the experience of a majority of players in the NFL. In Major League Baseball, if you play a day, all of a sudden you get access to the Major League Baseball health insurance plan for life. So I think something like that, where if you get to the NFL and you played a game, or you were on an active roster, you could have access to certain benefits for life. That's the sort of thing that I think would really benefit a lot of guys. I mean, I even go a step further and say, hey, let's develop a minor league system where you may not get a year of service time toward free agency, but maybe if you play a year in the minor league, you get a year of service time towards like pension and things like that. Like, something that would, something to provide like longer term benefits over lifetime. These are things that I'm thinking about. So I don't know. I'm Mr. Sensibility here. Like I'm thinking about long term and financial planning and so forth. And I will also give the NFL and like the Broncos credit for this as well. Like one of the things they do with their rookies when they bring them in, it's one of the things that they do when they have the rookies come in for a week earlier before the veterans. Is it's not just kind of getting them ready for the rigors of camp, but they've got things like financial literacy seminars that they do with them to get them to, kind of educate them on how to manage their money, how to manage certain things that they're going to come across as a rookie, that sort of thing. So anyway, Denver football after dark, out of control, spreading the games out among so many streaming services. So yeah. YouTube next Friday night. YouTube watching a game from Brazil. So, healthcare for life is so overdue. Yeah, this is the thing. Like, if I could just really just if I could just advise them and say, like, one thing that I would love for you guys to really fight for the next round of negotiations, make us fight for health care. Like, I mean, I don't, that is something that I really wish that they'd go for, especially when you've got. I mean, look at all the cases we see of these guys when they get in their 60s and 70s, having to sue and having to fight for, having to fight for money for, to get proper health care for injuries and things incurred because they played football for so long. I mean, that's another thing. It's a dangerous game. That's why you're never going to hear me call players soft. I mean, not when you play this sport, man. I mean, when you're putting yourself out there physically, ain't nobody soft. When you're putting your body on the line, ain't nobody in this sport soft. That's a word I will not use. I know some people use it. I'm not going to do that. When you go across the middle, you got some fearlessness to you, man. Anybody does. You got to have that to do it. I mean, I see Trent Sherfield going across the middle, even in practice. Like, it takes my breath away. Never fails to do that. So, anyhow. Great point, Mace. Yeah. I've been covering this game a long time, and I still never fail to be a little bit amazed by the persistence and courage a lot of these guys have going out there and doing that. And I'll tell you, a lot of these guys, they know that it's the equation, like the risk reward. They know what they're doing, and they accept the risk for the reward. And it's tough. I mean, what they put themselves through to do this. The benefits can be great if you make it, but boy, like, if you're on the fringe of this thing, man alive, and what you put yourself through. I mean, I've been back in the day. I was around the Arena League, and those guys were putting themselves through hell, and they weren't getting the benefits for it, but they were getting the same bruises and the same broken bones and the same soreness and the same pain, and they weren't getting the reward. So, yeah. I always assume when they get out the NFL, they have some kind of insurance. And yeah, well, I mean, when you get like an injury settlement, you get some money, and then if you're injured, like that particular injury at that moment, you have coverage. But yeah, it doesn't last. Like, I mean, not years down the line. So it's just the reality of things. With the 18-game schedule coming up, should we expect expanded rosters, game day actives? I mean, man, I hope so. Man alive, I do. I hope they're expanded rosters. I mean, I was saying today, I sometimes share with you conversations that those of us in the media have. I think this was with I had this conversation with I believe Cody O'Rourke at one point. Man, one of the dumbest things is having to deactivate players on game day. I think you should just play with everybody you have. Not this business of 53, but we have to sit down 7 players. I hate that. Expanded rosters, I would hope are going to come out of this. Game day actives, I would hope we'd see as well. So that's something to consider. But we'll see. Best thing about living in New Zealand, paying a small annual fee to get all the NFL games. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Just getting it, you get it online and you're good to go. One simple thing, one app, right through the NFL, right? And over here we've got, let's see, we have YouTube, and if you're doing it the streaming way, you've got YouTube, and you've got NFL Plus, you got ESPN Plus, and you got all these pluses. All these pluses end up leading to a minus in your bank account. So, oh, goodness gracious. Detroit Mission Control. Do anyone pick up Joaquin Davis, and why didn't the Broncos bring him back? I mean, I don't know the reason why they didn't bring him back. No one has picked him up. I liked his length. I liked his measurables. I liked his hands. I think we all did. I mean, he certainly had that way of plucking it out there. He probably didn't show as much in games in the end as maybe they wanted him to. I think also, when you look at it as well, in terms of receivers with length and speed, I mean, he has 4.3, 640. Just a tick slower, but also with the same type of length is A.T. Perry. And A.T. Perry's still there. And A.T. Perry is someone with whom Pete Carmichael has worked over multiple years, both in New Orleans and in Denver. A.T. Perry's also 10 pounds heavier, so 10 pounds more muscle than Joaquin Davis, and I wonder if things like that came into play as well. Sean Payton went on a kind of an interesting tangent today, and he got into the baseball thing, and it's some of his parlances are interesting. Like, he talked about practice squad players, and he started calling like how some of them are Tidewaters and Joplins. Basically, what he's talking about are AAA players and AA players in baseball. Your AAA players are ones who are they're ready to go. Like, if you call them up from the minor leagues, they can step in and play, but they can be often like more experienced. Maybe not as high ceiling of players, but they can step in and go right away. Your AA players are younger and they're more developmental. Those are your guys in Joplin. And Joplin would be in the Texas League, which is AA, or not the Southern League, but they're more of a developmental level. Tidewater for a long time now they're the Norfolk Tides, but they were the Tidewater Tides. And I thought to myself, I'm wearing this is the churros of rebranding of the San Jose Giants. But sometimes I wear the RVA hat for the Richmond Flying Squirrels. But I grew up with the Richmond Braves, and they were a rival of the Tidewater Tides. Tidewater Tides for a long time were the New York Mets affiliate back when I was growing up. And now they're the Norfolk Tides. And so that's kind of what he was referring to. A Tidewater player ready to step in would be more like an A.T. Perry, or Calvin Throckmorton would be a good example of that player. A.T. Perry actually might be both a developmental player and someone who's ready to step in. Michael Bandy would be a Tidewater player. They're talking about someone who's a guy who's been around a while, and if you needed someone to step in and play, he could be that. Then a developmental type of player, a Joplin player on the practice squad would be a Jordan Turner, perhaps. Caleb Lohner would definitely be a developmental player on the practice squad. So, anyway, Joaquin Davis, if he'd been on the practice squad, would have definitely been developmental. But instead, now he's not. I'm still a little surprised at that. Sometimes our assessment, as we view it from the sideline, differs from the internal assessment. So I would say with Joaquin Davis, he is raw. That is something we talked about when the Broncos signed him back in May. I talked about with him, and I know Cecil Lammey shared this opinion as well, and I know others have shared this opinion. I wanted to see where he'd be in a year if you gave him a year on a practice squad, a year to kind of take that raw piece of clay and mold him and see where he went. So, anyhow, Carry Anchor Barbecue. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. How do you think the O-lines will be, and is the outside zone affecting their regular pass pro? I think it is affecting them. I mean, I think you're asking them to do something different. You're asking them to change the way they go about things. And especially for Ben Powers, I think you're talking about something that isn't necessarily a strength of his. Now, for someone like Mike McGlinchey, this is something he ought to be able to transition to reasonably well. Quinn Miners, he's done elements of this before in 2022, and Quinn Miners is a fairly scheme-independent player at this point, so he should be able to adapt fine. Garrett Bowles, he's done everything to this point in his career, and he's athletic, and he's quick, and he's fairly nimble. He should do fine. Although with McGlinchey now, you are talking about him being an 8-year veteran. So is he going to be able to do everything that he could when he was younger? 8-year veteran, he's had some injuries over the course of his career. I think it's a fair question to ask. Garrett Bowles has not had as many injuries over the course of his career. He did have the significant injury in 2022, but he doesn't have as many injuries that have collected in his career as Mike McGlinchey has. The other thing with wide zone is it's something that requires a great deal of collaboration. Now, this being this offensive line's second year together as a collective, and for most of this group, their third year together, aside from Luke Wattenberg, this means they should be able to grasp it because they do have a great deal of cohesion. But I don't expect it to come together overnight. Mike McGlinchey did kind of allude to it earlier this week. I expect a settling in period as they adjust to this. I mean, Adam Troutman did say last week, I mean, they're committed to this. But I got to tell you, I think it is affecting them. But I think what they're hoping is that if they do this, and they get better at it over time, that in the back half of the season, it's making them better. That the result in the back half of the season is that you are getting an opposing defense to hesitate. The advantage of wide zone is that so many plays look the same to an opposing defense off the snap. And because of that, you get them to hesitate. You get that extra half second to 1 second advantage, and it makes all the difference in the world. Now, teams are hesitant to do this to go wide zone because of the extreme cohesion it requires, because of the extra athleticism it requires. The work you have to put in, and because it's more difficult to plug and play linemen into it, this is why you have a lot of teams that are hesitant to go wide zone. It takes more work to master this. And that's why some say, well, why don't you have 32 teams running wide zone? Because it's more difficult to master this. And because getting to a point where you can succeed at it takes more effort. You can't microwave wide zone proficiency. And so, unfortunately, that means you're probably going to have to live with some bumps in the short term. So, I appreciate you asking that, Sherry Anchor. That my little diatribe on that, not so much a diatribe, that's basically, that's not original. That's just years of watching various zone blocking principles, various zone blocking teams, and listening to people who know more than I do on this. I mean, this goes all the way back to listening to Alex Gibbs. I was lucky enough to watch Alex Gibbs coach, and lucky enough to be able to listen to him, and lucky enough to be able to have some conversations with him. Lucky enough, so like that's something I was privileged to do. Just be able to ask him some questions from time to time, and just actually learn a couple of things. So wish he was still around. That's one thing I will tell everyone here is that, like, if I share something, it's generally speaking something I have learned along the way from listening to a coach at a press conference, or just a coach who maybe shared something with me off to the side at some point, or a scout who shared something with me, or a player who shared something with me. Like, so much of what I share with you generally came from somebody who knew more than I did. And I just kind of put it all in the mental Rolodex up here and pass it on. So that's all it is. Just taking all the little bits and pieces over the years that I've accumulated from people who are wiser than I am, and then synthesizing it and passing it along. Isn't that what we all try to do? Just always listening. I mean, when Sean Payton, when he gets up there, I make a point of listening. I think when he's answering questions and when he's explaining things philosophically, I think he's someone to whom it's worth listening. So you can always learn something. And anyway, so that's my thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Infamous Alex Gibbs zone blocking. Yep. So, and the other thing is, all of us who've watched Broncos football for a long time, we know what this looks like, right? And we know what it looks like when it's good. And we know how well it can work. So, he needs to improve on hitting those open holes. RJ does. But the line has to create them first. Good morning, Mario, from out in Honolulu. You think George and the front office are waiting to sign Nik because they want to see how Ellis and others develop? I don't think they're waiting. I think it's just a negotiation. I think they'd like to sign Nik, but I think also, that being said, the price point on Nik that they have in mind is influenced by what they do have in Jonah and Andrea and even Q. I mean, George had some nice things to say about Q Robinson. Now, that being said, he had nice things to say about Savion Jones as well. And Savion Jones did not keep them from re-signing Zach Allen. Now, Savion Jones may certainly leave a price point for them on John Franklin Myers. But it may not be just Savion Jones. It's also probably Jordan Jackson and Iwazurike. I mean, they're carrying 7 interior defensive linemen right now. Most teams that have odd fronts carry 6. Broncos carried 7. With good reason. You could say that those 7 are among the 45 best players on the roster if you were ranking them 1 to 53. I mean, in other words, none of those 7 guys are fringy on the roster. They're comfortably on the roster. They're that good. And some game days you'll see 6 active, but probably plenty of game days you'll only see 5 active. It's going to depend on the type of team you face and what they emphasize. But that certainly comes into play when you're going to make a decision on JFM. I mean, George Payton did say that he'd like to have JFM back, but I believe the phrase was part of the puzzle. In fact, let's play George's response when talking about JFM.
Yeah, John is a really good player. Big bonus. We were able to get John last year, and like a number of other of our players in the final year of their deals, we'd like to have them all back. And John's no different. We have a number of players, and it's a puzzle. It's kind of like your roster management, like the 53-man. And so we're working through a lot of that now, but we're excited to have John Franklin. We're excited to have Wattenberg and a lot of these guys in the last years of their deals. So.
We're excited to have guys in the last years of their deals, but it's a puzzle. I mean, so that's kind of a loaded statement right there. You're excited to have them right now, but it's a puzzle. And you are getting to a point where it's tough decisions, and you do have to make choices and trust your drafting and developing. It's a good problem to have, but you will not be able to keep everybody. And that's okay. And the Wattenberg situation is interesting because, especially as you go to wide zone. Now, you did draft Wattenberg when you were putting zone blocking principles in 2022. But you have Alex Forsythe waiting in the wings. It would have been an interesting conversation if Nick Gargiulo had made the 53 if he had not been injured as well, because Gargiulo was having a heck of a camp. Gargiulo being injured probably put someone else on the 53. I mean, who's to say who that was? I think we know Gargiulo getting injured. That didn't put Frank Crum on the team. I think listening to Sean Payton talk about Frank Crum and the fact that there was interest in Frank Crum was going to be on the 53 regardless. But Gargiulo looked like he may have been in position to push for an interior spot there at some point. So, Denver Football After Dark here on this Wednesday morning. Appreciate all of you joining me here as usual. So, could perhaps trade one of our defensive tackles. That is actually something that has occurred to me thinking about carrying 7 when a lot of game days you're only going to activate 5. That maybe as the season wears on, is this a situation where one of them gets traded? And that's something that could come into play as well. Obviously, if you have an injury there, you're certainly very well covered. But everyone can look at the film and they can see that Eni Awazurike has come along. They can see that Jordan Jackson's played well. I don't think they're trading Savion Jones. Savion looked really good this preseason. Savion looked really good in camp. Savion's going to be a player. Man, I know I said this a few months ago, but his body type reminds me of Malik Jackson, and some of his pass rush moves remind me of Malik Jackson as well. And I do not throw that comp out lightly. So I say that advisedly, that he gives me some flashbacks. So take that as you will. I think by 2026, Savion Jones is playing a huge role in this D-line rotation, especially as a pass rusher. I'm excited to watch him develop. So, trade JFM. Ooh. Maybe. But man, I'll tell you, I think you can get a really good season out of him. And if you get a really good season out of him, especially in pass rush, I think JFM may sign a really nice contract this offseason. Maybe the type of contract that gets you a 3rd-round comp pick back. So think about that for a moment. Anyway. Like him too. He's a good quote and a good guy. So I'd like to see the Broncos re-sign him. I just don't see how it adds up. Even though it's a great room chemistry-wise, and I hate to see the chemistry broken up. Those personalities in that D-line room mesh so well together. I don't know if I can see it. I can see them all sticking around. But anyway. Well, I appreciate it, Derek, man. You didn't have to do that, but thank you. Trading players like Bonitto and JFM while we have replacements on rookie deals would be smart. Let's pick up some draft picks and keep this team young. Ooh. It would be smart, but in terms of the long term, it would be. But there's one thing about that. I mean, you trade Devon Vele, and certainly you got great value for him. See what I did there? But if you made a couple more trades like that, there's certainly, you have to wonder how that's going to go over in the locker room. I think JFM, I think that you might be able to get away with that one because of how deep your room is in terms of the number of players. And because he's, kind of like Devon Vele. I mean, he's a good player, but he's not a Pro Bowler. I mean, JFM is a starter, but he's not your top guy. Like Zach Allen is your alpha in that room. JFM is one of your, he's one of your next tier of guys, like DJ Jones, because you have Zach Allen's your alpha, and then you have DJ, and you have JFM, and you have Malcolm Roach. And trading JFM would basically kind of set you up to keep Malcolm Roach, because I think you can probably keep Roach or JFM, but probably not both. And Malcolm has come so far as a pass rusher that, that he's made himself into more than he was when he got here. So he's grown, and he's, a little bit younger than JFM too. Nik Bonitto, you are talking, if you did that, Derek, I mean, you'd be talking about trading someone who legitimately emerged as one of the best edge rushers from a pass rush perspective in the league. I mean, Jonah Ellis is definitely coming on, and Jonathan Cooper is really good. But, man, that you are talking about trading somebody who is emerging as one of the best pass rushers in the league off the edge. I don't know how that would go over in the locker room. That, I think, if you did that, I think you would have some pointed questions that came up. That's all. I think you have some that I don't know if that I don't think that would go over very well. And you have to think about that. This is where I kind of come in the phrase that say you're not playing Madden, you're not playing fantasy football. You are dealing with real human beings with real personalities, and these things would have real consequences to the players. I don't think you could do that to a team a team that's talking Super Bowl. Man, I think that would. I think the time to do that with Bonitto, to trade Bonitto, would have probably been leading up into this past year's draft. I mean, I threw it out there pre-draft. I know Cecil Lamb and I did a show about this. What if Bonitto was part of a trade to move into position to get Ashton Genty? Like, instead of trading a huge draft haul, what if it was Bonitto and a draft pick or two, and you moved up to 5 to take Genty? That's the sort of thing I could have seen as being, you could rationalize that. So, anyway, Jonah Ellis could prove to be a more complete player. He could. Yes, he could. But that's a heck of a dice roll. I'm not sure you do that with it. I'm not sure you do that right now with this team. I mean, now maybe you let Nik Bonitto play out the year. And I think if that's the case, I think what you do is you let him play out the year and then you do a tag and trade. I think that's more like what you do rather than make the trade now. I think it's a tag and trade and get what you need out of this year and then make the deal rather than make the trade at this point. I think you want to go through this year. So, $35 million. Yeah, that's why I say if you're going to, you play that, you have him play this year. Then I think you start to if you're talking about a trade, maybe it's after this year. I do not think you do it right now. So, finally got a break. Hey, Ignacio, good to see you, man. Good to see you. So Denver football after dark here on this Thursday morning here, as we wind to an hour and kind of wind to the end of the show. Like the chemistry at the D-line room. Yep, that's the one thing you don't want to mess with here, and I agree. But you may have to. And part of a team evolving means you do have to say goodbye to some guys, and you do have to monitor. You have to monitor the salary cap. You can find ways, you can be creative, and the cap is malleable, but you do have to do everything in the idea of Bo Nix, if he develops, that contract kicking in a few years. And I think they are planning things with the idea that Bo Nix will become more expensive in a few years, and with the idea of him developing into the long-term quarterback. So, all right, folks, I'm going to call it a night here because one more quick question. Right there, is Von Miller ever coming back to us? I think maybe at the very end, perhaps. And I appreciate you on the replay, Ignacio, watching. Thanks. And then D. Wills, is Von Miller ever coming back to us? Maybe at some point to end, like you say, to ride out his career. But I think you'd have to see some changes in the exit room. And if the Broncos re-sign Nik Bonitto, I find it hard to see unless it's ceremonial, because Andrea Tillman has at least 2 more years team control. And that's it. And then 3 if you include the RFA year. Q Robinson starting his rookie contract. Jonah Ellis, 3 more years on his rookie deal. If the Broncos re-sign Nik Bonitto, I think Von Miller would only come back for a ceremonial signing, and that's it. I think it would not dovetail. So, anyway, so the Bonitto idea, yep, there's a lot of debate about that. There'll continue to be more debate, but I still think Bonitto gets done here in the next week or 2. But it's interesting to discuss today, especially in light of the Micah Parsons news with that APY of $47 million, really driving up the edge rusher market. And it's not every day that you see the APY on a position go up 13% or so in one day. $41 million to $47 million with Micah Parsons' contract that he got from the Green Bay Packers. That's why it was worth discussing here on this show, as well as it was worth discussing Jeremy Crawshaw and the different practice protocol for him that came into play. So appreciate y'all joining me here for this edition of Denver Football After Dark for this Thursday night and Friday morning. And don't know if there'll be a Friday night and a Saturday morning show yet. So I'll probably put it in the comment section here whether there'll be a show or not. So I will pass it on to you one way or the other. There will be a show at some point this weekend, whether it's Friday night or Saturday night. I will let you know on here. So be looking for a show sometime this weekend on Denver Football After Dark. So appreciate you all joining me here. We'll talk more Broncos football over the weekend as the Broncos take a break before week 1. So thank you all for joining me here on this edition, and I'll talk to you next time. Have a great Friday wherever you are, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.